just let more people get into the webinar before we start it.
And I'll probably
So let's get started. Hello everyone, I'm Irhad Kozik and I'm with the Colorado Small Business Development Center Network's SBDC TechSource Commercialization Program. I'd like to welcome you all today to our SBIR STTR Proposal Preparation Workshop for the National Science Foundation. I'm going to give you just a brief introduction to our state's TechSource program. There are two components to this program, which include the cyber component, the CYA, Cover Your Assets, and commercialization. Support for cybersecurity considerations is provided to small businesses through free one-on-one consulting, training, and resources. If you're interested in receiving specialized consulting related to cybersecurity, please reach out and we will get you connected to this side of our statewide programming. The commercialization side is designed to support science and technology ventures throughout Colorado. Businesses are pre-startup through advanced second stage. So if you have an innovative technology, you're likely a fit for the program, regardless of your stage of business. SBDC TechSource Commercialization focuses especially on sources of non-dilutive capital where there's no equity given. Technology commercialization, SBIR, STTR grants. We also cover R&D tax credits, government accounting, IP protection, access to capital, and market research. We provide customized expert consulting at no cost to you, as well as relevant workshops, events, and accelerator programs. And anybody who is joining us from Boulder, Colorado, our Tech Venture Accelerator program application is actually this Friday. So if you're interested, please take the time to apply prior to that deadline. If you have any questions about the program, the accelerator in Boulder, please reach out to sharon.king@bouldersbdc.com. These resources are available thanks to support from the SBA's FAST program, VISA, the Colorado Office of Economic Development and International Trade, the Minority Business Office, and the City of Boulder. If you're a business located in a rural part of Colorado or are a minority or woman-owned business, we may have additional resources to help you, so please reach out. Just to go over a few quick things before we get started here. After this webinar, if you're interested in meeting one-on-one with a SBDC TechSource specialist or attending events, workshops, or webinars, please visit our website, sbdc-techsource.org, to get started. If you're located outside the state of Colorado, we encourage you to check out your local SBDC and the resources that they have for your individual state. Today's webinar is also being recorded, and you will receive an email following the presentation with a link to the recording. You will also receive a copy of today's presentation slides. And just a few housekeeping things. Everyone is on mute. If you do have any questions, please type them into the chat bar and we will try to get to them at the end of today's session. If you don't get your questions answered today, we can follow up with you afterwards. And now I'd like to introduce today's webinar presenter, Stephanie Amon. Stephanie Amon is the managing partner of Arrowhead Solutions, a full-service solutions provider for government contractors. Amon founded Arrowhead Solutions in 2009 with the goal of providing companies with the extra knowledge and manpower they need to succeed in the world of government contracting and startup culture. Specializing in capture management, proposal preparation, contract management, subcontracts, and compliance. Arrowhead provides skill sets not commonly available to many small government contractors. Amon also provides business coaching for startups, teaming and partnering consulting, and growth strategy sessions. Arrowhead Solutions is headquartered in Colorado. However, Arrowhead reaches clients nationwide. Amon is a Level 2 certified acquisition professional and possesses a BSA and MBA. As a member of the small business community, she's the vice president of the Salida Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors and advisor for the Small Business Development Centers of Colorado and former president of the Board of Directors for the Denver chapter of the National Contract Management Association. Stephanie, if there's anything you want to add, please feel free to do so. I'll hand it over to you now.
No, that was great. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for being here. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Go ahead and let's see. You can make me the presenter. That'd be great. Thanks everyone for being here. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here, everyone, today. I appreciate y'all taking the time to listen in on this presentation. Can you confirm that you can see this, Irhan?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'll go ahead and there we go. So this particular presentation is mainly specifically about NSF, but since there may be quite a few people on the call today who need a little refresher or don't know much about the SBIR STTR program, we'll kind of talk about that to start. As was mentioned, our company does kind of cradle to grave support, and SBIR STTR is something that I personally have been involved with for almost 16 years now. So continuously throughout the year, we're working on either a proposal or a contract award from this program. And I can't say enough good things about the program and how many of my clients it's helped and how many have grown significantly through the program. In the past, there was a lot of focus on DoD with this program. And recently, I've been seeing quite a bit of uptick in National Science Foundation interest. And so with the SBDC, I'm excited to share with you a little bit of the nuances that NSF has. It's kind of a creative way that they've approached this program. And so we'll kind of just jump off with talking about what the program is in general, what the solicitation looks like, or kind of the nuances that I was just speaking about with NSF, the eligibility to participate, the process that they take, the uniqueness of their registration, what's in an NSF proposal, and some budget nuances. If you're familiar with the program, there's some interesting uniqueness with NSF. And throughout the entire presentation, I'll be talking about strategies to use with NSF, and you'll end up hearing a very strong recurring theme with the program. So if you're not familiar with SBIR STTR, it is an early stage R&D, non-dilutive capital sort of program from the US government. It is the largest source of early stage financing for small businesses in the United States, which it's amazing. It's fantastic. There's so much money there to help innovative companies. It is 3 phases. Phase 1 is generally feasibility and pure R&D. Phase 2 is typically prototype or demonstration of that proven technology. And then phase 3, which is sort of an unofficial phase that's non-SBIR funding, to continue the SBIR work you did to move everything into commercialization. So getting it out to the market, whether the market is industry, the public, and or the government itself. The SBA is the overarching umbrella coordinating agency for the SBIR program. There's 13 agencies that participate. Obviously, National Science Foundation is one of them. And then the SBA sort of directs everybody, writes the policy and manages the website and all that kind of thing. So they're the main information links. So if you go to sbir.gov, that's run by the SBA, and then each agency kind of runs their own versions and nuances to the program. The big note, we were just talking before we made this live, is that unfortunately, the program is set to expire September 30th. There's a lot of effort being done behind the scenes by various groups to convince various members of Congress to reauthorize the program. It's been around since 1985. It's come up for reauthorization a number of times. Even since I've been working in this, it's come up, and it really hasn't usually taken this long. So we're still crossing our fingers. I know a couple of agencies are still committed to continuing on a version of SBIR, even if the program itself at the SBA federal level falls through, you know, the agencies, I think, rely on these programs quite a bit. And so we'll see what happens on October 1st. You may have noticed if you've looked at any recent SBIR solicitations that there might be a note in them that says, if you propose, you know, we may not be able to award, or we're not going to do new solicitations after October 1st. And that's kind of where all this is coming from, if you've been seeing those notes. But we're still hopeful. We still want this to go on. And the NSF proposals are due October 26th in this current round. So we're here. We're going to still be hopeful and provide you this information and be confident that it's going to be valuable to you still. The goal of the program in general across all agencies is to stimulate technological innovation. So that I in SBIR stands for innovation. So the federal government has R&D needs. They want to foster this participation through a lot of different groups. There's no points for being socially and economically disadvantaged, but they do encourage those companies to apply. But the ultimate goal is to provide non-dilutive federal funds into US companies that have technological innovations, and that will spur on private sector growth because those innovations are being commercialized. As you noticed in the intro, there's SBIR/STTR. They're all part of the same program. They essentially follow the same rules. They all follow essentially the same policy directive. The aim, though, of STTR, which is the tech transfer, is to have a cooperative R&D arrangement between small businesses and research institutions. So you have to have an institutional partner to propose on those topics, or you know, that group of an area within a solicitation. But there's only 5 agencies that do STTR: Defense, Energy, HHS, NASA, and NSF. And so there's a few different rules, but it's still the same thing. The thought is, if your partner, there's a lot of opportunity and ideas and innovation in these research institutions, and the best way to get them out of the research institutions and into the commercial marketplace is to partner them with a small business. For NSF specifically, their FOA, which is their solicitation, it's a funding opportunity announcement, is what that stands for. It combines STTR and SBIR into one. The other agencies split those 2 solicitations out into two different ones, but NSF is a combo. I'd like to talk about what SBIR is not. If you have an invention already built and you already have a couple prototypes or something, that this is not for you. You're too far along from where they want you to be. They want you to be at a lower technology readiness level. So it's not, you can't just go sell stuff to the government at that point. It is competitive. It's not guaranteed. You can't just continuously do research and development. They expect and they put benchmarks on you to actually commercialize and make sure you have sales and revenue and investment off of the funding that they provided you. You still, even though you're a small business, even if you're 1 or 2 people, you still have to do reporting. There still could be audits. There's government regulations that are, something you cannot avoid. So it's just a decision if you want to get into these programs and which agencies, what you're going to end up having to comply with. And it's also not a value engineering program. They're not looking for items that just sort of need some tweaking, especially NSF. There's a lot of legacy technologies, though, that small businesses are able to essentially repurpose or find innovative applications for. That is qualifying. So it's kind of a fine line when we talk about value engineering. And when we write proposals with people, we do a lot of strategy. If we're not sure exactly how you fit into the program, there's a lot of discussion and a lot of creative thinking that goes on to make you qualified for it. A lot of people ask about what the win ratios are for all of the agencies, but specifically for NSF, it's a pretty low selection rate. As you can see, the last annual report we have is from 2019, and only 14% of phase 1 proposals are actually selected. And we'll kind of talk about why. In general, across the board, it's typically between 25% win rate. So NSF is on the lower end of that. But when you get to phase 2, they end up being on par with other agencies where it's typically a 50% win rate. So often they'll award more than one phase 1 in a particular area. And so that's, you kind of down select after that to get to phase 2. But NSF is a toughie. They make some elements helpful and easy, and they make some elements difficult. We'll get into that. So this is the links to the solicitation. So when you get a copy of the presentation, go ahead and click on this link and you'll find the entire FOA. The ultimate takeaway from the solicitation is that, and this is the theme throughout and why it's only a 14% win rate, is that they're looking for groundbreaking discoveries, like breakthroughs. They specifically are looking to progress science. They want to look at health and welfare and prosperity. They call that like the economic benefit, the societal benefit. And they also want to secure national defense. So they're kind of looking at like the tip of the sword, or tip of the spear. They want something that's way out there. It's not fundamental or basic research, so that's the kind of stuff that typically happens in a university. They're really looking for bringing those kind of fundamental research things out and make them scalable. And so they want this, highly innovative ideas and things that have a little bit of legs to them already. They want to fund those to get those out into the market. So you'll hear me say high risk, high reward a lot with NSF that have a positive societal and economic outcome. So typically, they want to fund things that you may not personally be able to bootstrap because it is so high risk, or you may not be able to easily get investors so early because it is so high risk. But if successful and you had money from NSF to prove it, and you have a high probability of proving that your idea is going to work, it has a very high reward, meaning it's rewarding for the United States and potentially the global society and economy as well. So you'll hear that over and over and over again. That is the biggest thing with NSF. If you're going to think about proposing, you have to fit into that description. Otherwise, it may not necessarily be worth your time. The way that NSF works is that they don't have a specific, if you're familiar with other agencies like NASA or DOD, they don't have a topic that's kind of written out with objectives and deliverables and kind of what they want. They just have these clusters of general science, engineering, and technology areas. And those are biological and life sciences, math and physical sciences, data and computer sciences, and resilient and sustainable systems. And if you go on the NSF website, and it's like NSF Seed Fund or something like that, you can look at their portfolio. And it groups these high-level clusters into smaller kind of topic areas. So you might have like an AI topic area, or you might have like a biology topic area. So check out the website. It's just kind of suggestive. They want, you have to identify kind of what area you fall into, and you might be in an other topics area. But pretty much with NSF, you are just coming to them with your awesome idea. You're not waiting for, like the other agencies, waiting for them to ask you or tell you what their needs are. You're just going to NSF and saying, hey, I've got this amazing idea. It's high risk, high reward. Give me some money and I'll prove to you that this is going to be awesome and it's going to provide quite a bit of societal and economic benefit. once it succeeds. You know, I've seen various examples of NSF awards, and they're all over the board. So when people ask me, what does NSF fund? Everything. They fund everything. It can even be something that we might all consider somewhat low tech, but it's still risky, you know. And so you poke around that website and see what they've funded and their success stories, and it'll give you a really good idea. The one thing they don't do is they don't support clinical trials, and they don't work with like Schedule 1 controlled substances. You know, that's all more in the NIH world. The one thing I really, really love about NSF is that they require you to submit a project pitch that must be accepted by them. And that's essentially your invitation to submit a phase 1 proposal. So the other agencies, you're just kind of like hoping that you're a fit, and you spend a lot of time and resources and money to put something together, and you hope it gets selected. Whereas NSF says, hey, we want to hear your pitch, and then we'll invite you to propose, so that you're not, you know, kind of spinning your wheels too much. And I think that helps out quite a bit. So you do that online, and I think it's like 1,500 words, and, you know, online text boxes that you fill in. Talk about your project objectives, your innovation, of course, your associated technical risks. They also want to know about your team. You know, who do you have on, you know, who's your principal investigator? You only get to do one of those per business per submission window. And we'll talk about this, but there's 3 submission windows a year. And those your pitch can go in at any time. You can do one today if you wanted to. And so if they do like your pitch and they say, yes, we'd like to invite you to do a proposal, you have 1 year from that invitation to get your phase 1 proposal in, which is nice. It's a long, you know, helps out when there's a lot of other things going on. Kind of their timelines, though, and we'll talk about this. If you have a very fast growing business and you need quick infusion of money, this is not the program for you. This is the program for people with patience. And so it can take a while to see that money show up, even if you're quick on the draw and don't use up that whole year of waiting around to submit. It still can take a while. So say you did your pitch and you got your invitation. What do you get? You maximum $275,000 for their phase 1, and you can choose your period of performance at 6 to 12 months. They have these submission windows, and so you can submit your proposal at any time. What ends up happening is that they essentially kind of take the proposals that came in during that window. Those get evaluated. The next day, they open up the new window for new submissions, except for the one that closes in October, which this year it's October 26th is the closure. So you have about, I don't know, 6 weeks or so to submit. So hopefully you already have a invitation in hand, and you want to submit before the 26th. The new NSF will issue a brand new solicitation October 27th. And so if you are working off of the link I just sent you, anytime after October 26th, that's an old solicitation. So don't use that after the 26th. But it is an online submission into the system called Fastlane, and we'll talk about that here in a second. The eligibility for NSF is really no different than the SBIR program at large. So as a refresher, if you're familiar, if this is new, a small business for the program is less than 500 employees. All of the work, including subcontracted work, must be performed in the United States. Consultants, subs, everybody. You have to self-perform a certain amount of work. Phase 1s are generally 2/3 of the work you have to self-perform, meaning you have to do it yourself. Your principal investigator must primarily be employed by the small business. The thing specific to NSF is that they do not fund proposals from companies that are majority owned by VCOCs, hedge funds, or private equity firms. The process is just like the other SBIR proposal situation, really not much different. So you'll want to review the solicitation, determine your topic area. It's not in the solicitation. You do have to go to the NSF website. I always recommend reaching out to another nice thing about NSF is that they have program managers with their contact information on their website for each of those topics. And so it's great to try to reach out to them, kind of get a feel for this is especially helpful if you're not sure which one you fall under. Like if I'm under AI or I'm under robotics, you can reach out to them and say, hey, which one do you think I would fall under? Because you, in your proposal, you actually have to tell them where you think you fall so they know where to route your proposal to. So it's great. You can talk to those people. You have to do your registrations and certifications. You build your proposal and submit it in Fastlane. It gets evaluated. We'll kind of talk about what that process looks like here in a second. And then the selection notices. This is where I was mentioning that this can take a long time. Currently, they're 6+ months out on reviews. So I have some clients that submitted proposals earlier in the year and Q1, and we still haven't heard back yet. So once you do hear back, then it could take some time for the grants officer, again, this is a grant, not a contract, the grants officer to get you your award. So you could be potentially almost 9 months from when you submitted to when you can actually start bringing money in the door for your phase 1 and working on the project. So if your business plan and your timeline and strategy for your company can't account for that lag, essentially, like you need to be doing your phase 1 work in the next 6 months, and the timeline may not work out for you. The registration, SAM.gov, which all federal contractors need to be in, all SBIR applications regardless. Same with the SBA company registration on SBIR.gov. That has to be done regardless of which agency. The one specific to NSF is research.gov. And through research.gov, when you log in there, it gets you to Fastlane, which is the proposal submission system. So everything is done online, whether through clicking boxes and typing text onto the online, or or uploading PDFs of various parts of the proposal into the system. The proposal package is pretty beefy for NSF. I would say NSF and NIH are probably the two more complicated proposals to do out of all the agencies who participate in the program. So each of these items that you're seeing here, they're kind of small, but a project summary, a project description. The project description is essentially your technical proposal. What am I going to do? The references. So all of these, the expectation is that you're doing research, that you're a researcher, that you're knowledgeable. So they expect a references cited page with multiple references. So your project description needs to have citations. Like a paper, like a college paper would. So, to show that you know what the industry is doing and that you are cutting edge. So pay attention to that. That can kind of trip some people up who haven't been in the research field or recently. You'll need biographical sketches for your key personnel. You'll need a budget and sub-award budgets. Again, so you'll need your sub-awardees, meaning your subcontractors and consultants, to fill out a pretty complicated, annoying budget form, along with the budget justification. So that can also trip people up. So that you need to just give yourself lots of time to get that done. You'll need a current and pending support form, which they give you, a collaborators and other affiliations form, which they give you. You fill these out. Facilities, equipment, other resources document, a bunch of supplementary documents, and then the additional single copy document, which is really only the invitation that you got. So you have to they send you an email saying that you were invited, you have to upload that. So all of these things you'll see when you open up all of the templates that they provide you are very much geared towards academia. And so it can kind of be a challenge if you're not in academia or from academia to fill some of this out, but it just helps to understand that that's where they're coming from. And If you say not applicable to a bunch of things, that's actually okay. If you're a commercial company and you don't have a bunch of academic affiliations, that's okay. The other thing about NSF is you have to use 3 things to build your proposal. That solicitation, the FOA, this fast lane submission guide, which walks you through how to put everything into that submission, and then this NSF proposal and award policies and procedures guide. So these 3 things have to come together in order for you to build a compliant proposal. And it just kind of, if you're doing it on your own, it takes a lot of time just to read it all and kind of methodically go through with everything. For your project description, the focus is on the R&D. So this is research. Phase 1 is research to prove feasibility, that you think that your idea has the ability to move forward into prototyping. So the kind of things that they look for and what they consider to be R&D, they're very specific, that they only want R&D proposals. So your proposal and your project description needs to fit within one of these 4 bullets. So you're doing studies, you're manipulating structures, you're using the scientific method, you're doing measurements and observations, experiments, modeling. That you also need to have in that project description that you have a well-qualified team to do these sort of things. And so the challenge with NSF is they say, hey, you don't need a PhD to be here, which is true, but your PI needs to be qualified to lead the research. So your PI can't be just the founder of your company who has a great idea and is going to subcontract a bunch of it out to consultants, or has like 1 employee who actually knows, has a master's degree potentially in computer modeling or whatever. The PI has to be somebody who's well versed in doing research and leading research, and that's critically important. We'll go on to what the project description is so that you can kind of get your brain wrapped around what they want you to talk about. So say that you feel like you fit all of the things that I've mentioned. The project description is 15 pages max. The format's given to you in the FOA. But the 3 things that they want to see is that you have evidence that says that, hey, we are innovative, there is high technical risk, we have a plan to get to the determination on whether or not this is technically feasible. Like, we actually know the tasks that we're going to do with your $275,000. That we have the expertise, we have the resources, we are committed to building a business and a product and a service ultimately out of these ideas, and that ultimately we're going to commercialize this technology, of course, as mentioned before, that has an impact, a positive impact. So that all needs to be written up in the 15 pages in the format, the sections that they ask you to write up. To expand upon the supplementary documents that they want you to see, these are all of the things that you're supposed to have if they're applicable. So, we have letters of support, I think, are very, very important for NSF. You can't have more than 3 letters, but you really want supporting letters, not from your next door neighbor, but potentially from a future customer. You don't get them from your subcontractors. So these are people out in industry or other government agencies who are writing you a letter to say, hey, NSF, I really think you need to fund this because it's important to me as the letter writer. So these are just applicable. You'll read in the FOA whether or not they're required for you. You will need letters of commitment from sub-awardees and consultants. So they actually write you a letter that says if you win, they will work for you. So all of these things all get uploaded as well as the budget. So they give you a format for the budget. Again, you have to self-perform 2/3. Your PI must have primary employment with your company. And when you build your budget, you have to devote a minimum of 1 calendar month equivalent of hours for every 6 months of performance. So you just can't have a PI in name only and say, hey, they're going to work 10 hours over the course of 6 months. So they need to work, I think NSF calculations like 173 hours a month or something is 1 month. With your indirect rates, you do have to propose indirect rates, but most companies who haven't been around the SBIR program or maybe haven't specifically worked with HHS or DOD, you may not have approved indirect rates. And so NSF says you can do one of two methods to ask for an indirect rate, so I'm talking about like labor, overhead, fringe, and G&A. And the instructions are there in the FOA to help you. And you will have to have that budget justification. So you put the numbers into the budget, and then you have a separate document that says kind of, hey, I'm asking for 180 hours for my PI, and this is the hourly rate I pay the PI, and this is what the PI is going to be doing, yada, yada. So there's a lot to it. There's definitely a lot to it. So the evaluation criteria for NSF follows along the lines of what their emphasis is in the FOA, and that's really about the intellectual merit, technical risk and innovation, and the broader impacts. And as with all SBIRs, the commercialization potential is part of the evaluation criteria as well. So the bullet that I really like to focus on is that first sub-bullet under technical risk and technological innovation. So the risk assumes that there is a possibility of failure. And that's what they want to see, is that they want to see that you have a high possibility for failure, which sounds interesting. Again, high risk, but that you have articulated in your proposal that you're capable of mitigating or avoiding that risk and that you will be successful. So you've got two challenges, is to not only convince them that it's high risk, but that convince them that you are low risk in doing that technology. So it's a very fine line to walk, and it has to be really clear to the reviewer so they don't, make their own assumptions about what you're trying to say. They also want to know that what you're doing is different. Kind of going back to those references cited, that this is a new technology, that has a substantial and durable advantage over the competing solutions on the market or other research that's already been done, all of those things. So that's when you're writing your project description, you're doing your research. You have to do your research on what the market's like and how you're different and, who's done what already. And those are the types of things, you cite those in your project description. And they give you, regarding the broader impacts, they give you criteria on kind of what they see as like desired impacts. So you should definitely look at those impacts criteria and see which one you fit into, hopefully more than one, of where you are going to make an impact. And then the commercialization is important because that's how the SBIR program is graded, is the commercialization potential. This is where Congress wants to see reports to see that their money is or our money is being used well as taxpayers. And so we want to know that, there's a target customer base, that it's meeting an unmet need for that target customer base, that you have the right people or the right resources to go after commercialization, that you're not just purely research, and that you have a good product market fit. And so you have a big challenge, because not only do you need to plan out the research, convince somebody that it's high risk, high reward, and that you're going to have this great economic and societal benefit, but you also have to think of the whole business side of this, on how you're going to turn this idea into a product or service that is going to be put into the market. So that's the challenge. The review process is different for every agency, but specific to NSF, they have an ad hoc review or a panel review. They review your proposal, provide a summary. The program officer will consider the advice of all the reviewers and then formulate an award or no award decision. The program officer will recommend to the division director whether or not it should be declined or recommended for award. And then after that's happened, those recommended for funding will go to the grants and agreements division to review any of the business, financial, and policy implications that go along with the award. And if that passes, then the grants and agreements officer contacts you with the grant to sign. And so that's the whole process. So that's why it does take a while for these to be evaluated and kind of go through all the hoops. It's because of all these steps. Okay, so I wanted to leave enough time for questions because this one is sort of complicated. Hopefully there are questions, but I'll let you guys throw some at me.
Awesome. So if you have any questions, please put them into the questions tab or put them into the chat and we'll get to them. We have some questions in place right now, so I'll ask those and Stephanie can answer. So the first question we have is there a definition for tech companies? Are there any specifics to be considered into the category tech?
No, there's no definition for tech companies. It's just innovation that they're looking for, and innovation is obviously dependent upon what currently exists out there in the world. So things, like I said, can be high tech, like AI, they can be low tech. You know, I worked with somebody years ago that had new building materials, you know, innovative sort of building materials for third world countries. So, you know, those are kind of different ends of the spectrum. They're both innovative, but they're different sorts of tech. So there is no definition for that. As long as you meet the definition for what they consider innovative, then that's what's most important.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephanie. The next question that we have is, are SBIR, STTR funds available to commercialize national lab patented technology?
So if I'm not sure if I quite understand the question, but if the national lab, if you have a license from the national lab to do stuff that's allowed to commercialize their technology via license, and that's okay. NASA does that. So you could have a license to use NASA patents, for example, and commercialize those patents through the SBIR program. So that is possible. You can also, through STTR, partner with an FFRDC, so a federally funded research and development center, and partner with them under an STTR and have them be your sub-awardee, and therefore, you know, get technology out of it that way.
A follow-up to that question is, does having a patent help?
No, it doesn't necessarily help. Through the program, anything that is patentable or becomes a patent, you own. So you get to own that patent, but the government does get some rights of use to your patent. So there might be some business decisions in there to where you might want to patent something that you're already going to patent anyway before you come into the program, so that the government may not necessarily have that use for something, you know, if you were to patent it after the award began, then the government might be able to claim some use to it. Again, you always get to retain ownership, but I don't necessarily think it gives you a leg up. I've seen probably more proposals awarded without patents mentioned than proposals that have patents mentioned awarded. Oftentimes, if you already have a patent, you might be a little too far along for phase one anyway, because that's just a technical feasibility determination phase.
Thank you. The next question that we have is, what restrictions are there to having other funding sources when receiving SBIR funding other than VC hedge fund ownership?
There is no other restriction. So you can have funding coming from all other sources as long as the ownership structure, that it's primarily owned by a US citizen, and that you don't have that VCOC hedge fund private equity ownership in there per the agency's rules, because each agency is a little different on that. Then you can have money coming in from others. Just make sure that the ownership, ultimate ownership, is US. So if you have private individual investors, that's fine, but make sure that they don't own a majority of the company if they're foreign. But other than that, that's all that you need to worry about.
Awesome. So the next question that we have is the preparation to get the grant lasts close to a year.
It could. Yeah, it definitely could. So say you already did your project pitch and you have an invitation in hand and you submit a proposal in the next 6 weeks, then 6 months from now, 6 months from the next 6 weeks, you might get word that you have the award. So, we're pushing 7, 8 months. But that's because we're at near the end of this submission window. So like if you came in early in a submission window, then yeah, you easily could be a full year waiting around. And by the way, the project pitches responses have been coming back pretty quickly lately. They claimed to get back to you in about 3 to 5 weeks after you put that project pitch in, but I've seen as little as 2-week turnaround on those. So if you did want to get in on this window, there is a potential that you could submit your project pitch like today, and get that word back that you've been invited and still have time to get in for October 26th. That's a possibility, but it would be cutting it super short. So there is some timing strategy on NSF, definitely.
Awesome, thank you. So the next question that we have is not NSF specific, but are phases and cycles the same? I see in the grant deadlines that there are usually 3 dates. Does that mean we can't apply for phase 1 if we're past the first set of dates?
So every agency is different on how many solicitations they release a year and what the dates are. So for example, NASA only does 1 a year, and that's like usually in January. And so if you miss that January deadline in 2023, you won't be able to submit a phase 1 until 2024. So that's one example. DoD has multiple phases. NIH, NSF have kind of these ongoing phases, but NSF is really the one that has kind of these windows. So you can only submit 1 proposal per window. Because the windows aren't hard and fast, you can submit them at any time, and then you just have to wait for the response back before you can submit another one. There are a few agencies that will allow you to skip phase 1, and they will solicit in their solicitation, they'll explicitly say that they have a direct to phase 2. So if you've already done all the phase 1 work on your own dime, and you're closer to phase 2, which is like you've gone beyond feasibility demonstration and now you're working towards prototyping, you could jump directly into phase 2. But otherwise, you have to time your solicitations with those phase 1 solicitation open and close dates posted by each agency, which is different.
Awesome, thank you. So the next question that we have is, what makes someone experienced enough in leading research to be a PI on an SBIR grant?
That's a really good question. I think it's super subjective. What they look at is your resume, so your experience, your education. They'll ask you for publications. There is an assumption that you're published. So if you have like a scientific sort of background, your resume shows that you've done research in the past or somehow led development projects in the past. And of course, if you're published, then they would definitely give you much higher marks and say that you are qualified to lead research versus someone who, maybe has a business degree, hasn't ever published anything related to the technology, hasn't ever developed anything related to the technology, then they probably wouldn't say that that person's necessarily qualified to lead. So you kind of need to have the CV behind you to show that you know what you're doing and what you're talking about as it relates to that innovation.
Awesome. So the next question that we have now is, for resubmissions, how best do we identify the corrections and improvements made from last submissions, reviewer comments?
So the FOA provides the specific instructions on how to identify that and what to do, and how to mark that up into Fastlane as well. So typically it's just a resubmission. But I don't recall in this year's FOA what the specifics are for if there is a way to even highlight what has changed. So I would definitely look at the FOA. And in the absence of any direction in the FOA for changes, it typically is just a resubmission of the whole thing. You don't identify the changes.
Thank you. So the next question that we have is preliminary data for a technology proposal critical? If it's an idea only and needing funds to conduct work, what are relative chances versus the one proposal with preliminary data?
It probably is a higher bar to jump through to say that you don't have any preliminary data, because anybody can kind of come up with an idea and they're not necessarily in the business of wanting to fund the ideas because that might be a little too high risk. Like I said, it's a very fine line to follow, but every NSF proposal we've ever submitted has some sort of preliminary data. So that when we talk about, if you want to look up what technology readiness levels are, there's a scale, and typically we come into a phase 1 at like a TRL level 1 or 2, and we exit at a TRL level 2 or 3. Like it's a pretty small jump, but it's not 0. So, you know, we're here at the bottom of the technology readiness level, but it has some readiness in it to justify funding.
Awesome. So the next question that we have is, who is usually chosen for the panels?
They can be from a lot of different areas, I guess. I mean, they can be part of people from NSF or academia. There's not really a publicized method on how they choose who's going to be on the panel or if it's an ad hoc review. So it's just kind of a big unknown. But what you can count on is that the people who are reviewing will have most likely an engineering/scientific background, and they will come from the industry cluster that you've identified in your proposal on where you fit. But you have to be aware that these people may not be super duper experts in your field. So that's part of your challenge, is to not put everything in layman's terms, but not assume they know everything either.
Awesome. So the next question that we have is, can you speak to the time of the performance window, 6 to 12 months?
So you get to choose. So depending on what you're offering to NSF and what you want to do and what you want to do with the money, it's up to you on how long it's going to take you to work through your research plan. So it might take you 6 months, it might take you 12 months. You may not need all $275,000. So it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. And then that's, you are the one who chooses 6, 7, 8, whatever, up to 12 months of performance.
Awesome. Thank you. So the next question that we have is, can people from abroad propose for the grant if they will move to the US, Colorado in this case? Is there special support for female tech?
Well, if they move to Boulder, they might be, we just had a TVX women's group in Boulder, but that aside, there's not some specific element here in the SBIR program to support. You have to attest when you submit the proposal that the work is going to be done in the United States. Remember, though, that the ownership of the company has to be a US citizen or qualifying like green card holder. So you can, if you are a US citizen green card holder living abroad, that's okay to submit the proposal, but when the award and commencement of the work starts, because you attested to it, the work has to be done on US soil.
Awesome.
Which I know is weird
that's
in a very virtual world, but that's the way it works. Like you have to have an address in the United States for your office.
And also for that TVX for Women program, that it is a statewide program. So if you're in the state of Colorado, you can apply to that program.
There you go. Thank you.
The next question that we have is, are you able to point to a successful NSF AI proposal example? AI leverages existing tech to uncover patterns in novel data. Concern is that seems like an engineering problem over a scientific one that NSF prefers.
Right. They definitely look at AI application. So the use of AI to solve really big, hairy problems. I would go on the NSF SBIR website and take a look at some of the success stories and review some of the stuff that they've done on AI. Successful proposals are not publicized. It's obviously something I can't share either, since my clients paid for the support and it's all proprietary. But on sbir.gov, you can read the abstracts of prior NSF awards. So that is publicly available information as your summary / abstract. So you could go there as well.
Thank you. For the next question, it's on the budget for senior personnel. How would one treat the owner of a startup that is not drawing a salary, but is integral in the research and commercialization aspects?
That's a great question. You have to draw a salary. What would your salary be when you get the award? So you do have to pay yourself when you get these awards. And so you have to put a reasonable compensation in there for the owner.
Awesome, thank you. So the next question that we have is, on the proposal application, there's a spot for location of research. This does not have to match the SBC physical address.
It does not, but you should put both, because otherwise somebody's going to wonder why do you have two different addresses? So typically, if there's work being done at a different address, that either means it's not being done by the SBC, or the SBC has two locations. And so you need to either identify that you have two locations and put both, like the home office address and maybe a lab address, or in the fact that if you're like leasing space, or if it's a subcontractor, you have to put that address. So you still should put your location of work, because there's an assumption that some of the administrative and commercialization functions would be happening out of that main address. That's the assumption.
Thank you. So the next question is, do you know if the 14% award rate is based upon full proposals submitted, or upon the entire submission process that includes the project pitches?
It's just the full submission, just the phase ones. So they do say yes to a lot of project pitches. And there's a high likelihood that you might get a yes on that project pitch, but there's not a huge likelihood. It helps, that you're getting a yes on that project pitch, but they do say yes a lot. So it's still 14% just on that phase one.
So thank you. So the next question is, does NSF allow application for phase 2 award without having received the phase 1 award?
No.
Thank you. So the next question is, thanks. Can I use relevant preliminary data in a slightly different field for my past publications or past publications through an NSF grant around 8 years ago?
I think it'd be better than having nothing. So I would say that that's definitely worthwhile, because you kind of do have a relevancy thing to talk about in your project description. So you can sort of tie that together, but I don't see a harm in putting that in. At least it shows that you've done stuff.
Awesome. So the next question that we have is, would NSF fund manufacturing only of biologic that we have extensive basic research on as phase 1 or phase 2?
If you've already have extensive research on it, it may not qualify for phase 1, but I'd recommend reaching out to the program manager at NSF that you feel is the best fit for what you have, and asking them. Again, if you have a lot of the questions about whether or not you're a fit, and if you're phase 1 or phase 2 and which topic, definitely reach out to those PMs, because of all of the agencies, NSF is actually responsive and kind of helping you know if you're a fit or not.
Awesome. So we have a couple more questions. If you plan to sell to consumers, is the expectation that you get letters of support from people that use current technology and want to try your technology?
I would not get a letter of support from a consumer. I would get a letter of support from whoever. Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, it probably won't be seen super great if you have like, again, like like an individual that could be your neighbor who says, yeah, I use that technology. You would probably be better to get it from some like industry group or representative industry group if that's the case, if you're going to be direct to consumer. That's a tough one on the direct to consumer front, but I would try to avoid getting them from just random people.
Awesome, thank you. So the next question is, can a phase 1 award go to a project that has already begun but not finished?
You'd have to write your project description to still prove that it fits on a phase 1 proposal. There's definitely no harm in self-funding or, working on a project kind of in tandem. You need to segregate what scope of work the NSF is paying for versus what you're doing outside of that. And so that might be also a question for a program manager.
Since we're running past 11, we'll ask you this one last question and then end the webinar afterwards. So do I need a green card when proposing, or can I apply for a green card when I get a confirmation for phase 1?
No, you'll need a green card when you're proposing.
Awesome. I think that's it for the questions that we have. Thank you, Stephanie, for taking time to kind of go through this with all of us and answering everyone's questions.
Yeah, happy to help.
If anybody else has any questions, please reach out to us and we can provide you with some answers for that. Also, today's webinar is recorded and everyone will receive an email following the presentation with the link to the recording, and I'll also share Stephanie's slides with all of you guys. And then if you guys are interested in meeting one-on-one with an SBDC tech source specialist or attending events, workshops, or webinars, please visit our website, sbdc-techsource.org, to get started. Once again, we want to thank you, Stephanie, for just taking time out of your day to go through this with everyone and getting all these questions answered.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody's time. Good luck.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.